Hello and welcome to the American Resolution Podcast. I'm Heather Gardner, and my guest today is the highest-ranking woman in Congress, House Minority Whip, Congresswoman Katherine Clark. And wow, what a busy week it's been for Congress. I am so grateful the Congresswoman made time for us to talk about some super wonky but super important topics regarding the government's budget. And yes, this does affect you. Congresswoman Clark broke down what's in the bill and what's not in the bill, which has been a hot topic in my comment section regarding no tax on tips, Social Security, and overtime. And we talked about Democrats' historically low approval rating and what their plan is to fight back against the Trump administration and DOJ. So let's just jump right in. Whip Clark, it is an honor to have you here. I know it's noon where you are, but it is early for me. I'm not a morning person. It is 9 a.m., but just for you.
I appreciate that because I already have my very large coffee with me. So
I've already had 2 cups. That's the only reason I'm even remotely able to do this right now. We've got a lot to get to. And, as we were prepping for this interview, we knew we were going to talk about the impending budget and the proposals and, a potential government shutdown and everything. But as I was prepping for this interview, new information has come down. So let's just start with that because last night, President Trump on Truth Social, it now seems like he is endorsing a CR, which is a continuing resolution of this budget. What is happening?
Yeah, we are really into Washington speak now when we're talking about CRs and reconciliation and lifting the debt ceiling and anomalies. Nobody knows what we're talking about. So a CR is basically an extension of the budget because Congress—
The current budget
from the past year, because Congress has not been able to come together and pass a new budget. So it's basically kicking the can down the road to keep the fundamentals of government functioning. So that our budget extension, which we have done 6 in the last 2 years, it expires on March 14th. And so what the president is saying is that even though we have the House is Republican majority, the Senate's Republican majority, I'm in the White House, we are not up to the task. And we are once again going to kick it down the road.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but does this mean there will be nothing new? So these impending tax cuts for the billionaires and adding the, almost $3 trillion to the deficit over 10 years, that is not happening. What they voted on earlier this week is what he's saying now, that is off the table. That is not happening.
Well, that is still on the table, but on a different table.
On a different timeline, not before March 14th.
So that budget that we passed, that was proposed by the House Republicans, now will go to committees for them to actually put into place and then off to the Senate. So that's over there. This is about dealing with the ongoing daily funding to keep government functioning. But what is different from our last vote on this in December is that we have seen Donald Trump and Elon Musk come in and say all this funding that Congress allocated to keep our schools open, to keep seniors with home health aides, to make sure we're feeding hungry kids in this country, that you still have clean water coming out of your tap in your kitchen. All of that we're ignoring. We're ignoring that law. We're ignoring those decisions that were signed into law that Congress made. And we are going to take these services that deserving taxpayers are paying for, and we're going to give all that taxpayer money to the billionaire class. So we are in a new world order now where all of these continuing resolutions, appropriations process, all the words that we put around, how do we help everyday Americans get by and get ahead, is being ripped up, ignored, illegally and unconstitutionally. And that taxpayer money that we have given to our veterans and teachers is now being sent to the billionaire class.
Mm. But not till September, possibly.
Well, we're coming up on March 14th.
Okay, I see. So I guess
Yeah.
listen, I'm even a little bit confused here too, because in my mind, when I read, we're kicking this down the road till September, I was like, okay, like we're not going to deal with this. They're not ramming it through now because, we could talk about the special elections too, but there's a small chance that Democrats could take back the House. But I was like, in my mind, I'm like, all right, let's get this done. I will fly to Florida. What do we need to do?
Yeah.
To maybe stop some of this if they're not going to vote on the tax cuts for the billionaires till September. But please tell me if I'm wrong here.
Well, it's all part of one giant scam where you take
Oh,
money.
okay. Okay. Now we're talking.
You take the money that Congress has said this goes to helping kids with disabilities. This goes to providing veterans with health care because they were exposed to burn pits when they served our country.
Hmm.
This pot of money goes to making sure we have clean water and clean air. This pot of money is making sure that we are helping consumers and protecting them from corporate greed and drive down prices. And what this administration has said is all of that is now to be ignored. And we
Mm.
take all of those taxpayer funds and then we give them to people who are too wealthy to probably even notice their $6 million tax cut,
Wouldn't
but
that be
who
nice to
will.
not notice $6 million extra
It would
dollars in
be
my bank
very
account?
nice, but that extreme wealth protects people from the realities of every other American has, where we have to live
Hmm.
at a budget. And when we look at the cost of groceries, the cost of eggs, if you can find eggs anymore,
They're
the cost.
$13 a dozen here.
Yeah, the cost of childcare, housing, rent, all those things are being stripped away. So what would have been two different tracks, and procedurally they're on different tracks, have really become one part of a giant scam because any
Mm.
money we give to them is now being repurposed to give it to billionaires.
Well, let's clarify some of the biggest things that I'm seeing in my comment section. I posted a video about how the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security for seniors was not in this bill. And then there was a lot of chatter about an $880 billion cut to what some people are saying is Medicare and Medicaid, what Republicans are arguing is not. And let me tell you, I posted this video and there were thousands of comments of Republicans saying that the Democrats were lying and the Democrats saying that the
Wow.
Republicans were lying. So let's just get everything straight right now. Is no tax on tips and Social Security and overtime, is that in this outline, this plan?
No, no.
Okay, well then, okay. Thank you very much for your time. No.
Yeah. And the reason we know that is because they are proposing a $4.5 trillion tax cut.
Mhm.
So for the things that are popular, like not taxing tips and Social Security and overtime, things that could actually help everyday working people, um, those have been put to the side and would cost additional money. And that's how we know they're not included, because the funding for that, the 4.5 trillion, only covers the tax breaks that go to the most wealthy out there. And so, we look forward to coming up with a tax plan that actually makes everyone pay their fair way. That actually
Mhm.
says, why don't we look at corporations and say it's not okay that Amazon and Tesla don't pay federal taxes? Why don't we look at saying maybe the billionaire class can afford to do a little more so that we can reduce tax for the middle class in this country? So that's what's on the table. But around the bill that they've proposed in the budget, those are not in it at this point.
What about the $880 billion cuts that they say are not going to affect your Medicare or your Medicaid? Like I said, there's this big controversy. Everybody's lying to each other. What about that? They're saying it's not. Do you think they're planning on cutting these social services?
100%. This is the plan. So when they put out their budget plan, they said 880 billion will have to be cut from the programs under the Energy and Commerce Committee's purview. So that's what it says. So that's why they're saying those words, Medicaid, aren't there. There's no other program in which they can cut 880 billion.
Just so we're clear, the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, it oversees
That's
Medicaid.
right.
So just because the actual word Medicaid
That's
does not
right.
appear in this bill does not mean that it's going to be unscathed.
And the reason that you know that now that people are on to what they are doing, on to the theft that is happening before their eyes of their health care, is that many of the Republicans who turned around and voted yes for this cut, before the cut, were writing letters to Speaker Johnson saying, this is too big a cut to Medicaid. I can't, my constituency is too reliant on these Medicaid dollars. This will close the rural hospital in my district. And then they got the word from Donald Trump that they needed to get in line. They got in line. And now they're saying, well, I don't actually see the word there. You already wrote the letters saying this cut is unsustainable. The American people need to have nursing home care. The 40% of kids in this country who get their health coverage through Medicaid need that to continue. Disabled children, disabled adults who rely on the home health care workers to survive are paid through Medicaid. I mean, so this is a huge sleight of hand. And I'll tell you what, the American people aren't buying it. They understand what's at stake. They understand that they are taking their health care just like they did to fund these exact same tax cuts in 2017. It's the same playbook. So when Republicans are up there saying, this isn't happening, we can look to their own words. And in fact, even today, they're starting to say, well, maybe this is happening, but that's because American people are lazy and staying home and not working, and they need to go out and get jobs with private health insurance. So they are already victim blaming while saying we're not actually doing this.
What? I did not. You shocked me this morning, Representative Clark. I had not heard that.
Congressman Andy Biggs, you can check out his comments.
I certainly will after this. All right, let's pivot to not a very fun topic here, but the low approval rating. I mean, it's historically low for the president's second term, and it's also historically low for Democrats. About a week ago, Quinnipiac released some polling that showed that Donald Trump's approval rating is 45%. Congressional Republicans are about 40%, and congressional Democrats are 21%. Now, in my personal opinion here, and you are more than happy to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a lot of people are seeing the Democrats fighting back, which is wonderful. But I mean, there's a lot of action, but not a lot of results or what they perceive as results. I mean, it's definitely up for debate, but the feeling is clearly real here. How are you going to convince the American people that you're doing everything you can? And are we doing everything we can?
Yeah. No, listen, people are real mad. They're real mad.
I don't blame them.
They're deeply frustrated. Nobody blames them. And they are so anxious about what they see happening. I mean, this takeover by Elon Musk and all that he stands for, all the wealth and the power of our government, this unelected, unvetted person going in and firing just yesterday, decimating the work of NOAA, that keeps track of the
Yeah.
weather for all of us. All those apps on our phone are powered by the data coming and funded by the federal government. And so, people are so worried about the future of our country and what's going to happen to their families with this onslaught from this administration. So I get why they're like, the Dems need to chain themselves to the fence around the White House and not move. And, that is so understandable. And what we have to do is continue with our strategy. And it's 3 points. First, we got to use the courts and litigate in every way we can. We have to be clear-eyed that we're in the minority, but we have to continue to legislate and use those levers we have. And then third is mobilization and making sure that we are communicating with our constituents and the people of this country what's at stake, what all these budget terms mean. Keep repeating the truth because they are getting an onslaught of misinformation, and bring people together around what is good for the American taxpayer, what is good for American families, hardworking Americans who have entrusted their representatives in government to go down and be their voice. They want us to be yelling from the rooftops. And that's exactly what we have to do. We have to use all three of those levers: litigation, legislation, mobilization, to bring this together and have people understand the real stakes and danger of what is happening in the Trump administration.
I love Hakeem Jeffries, but I'm going to be honest with you. I could not have been less moved by the flurry of righteous litigation. I understand that is the way to do it. But I think if you actually did chain yourself to the White House, Democrats might. Is that going to be part of the strategy? The visual of that, I feel like Democrats would be like, okay.
There are times where I'm like, maybe that's just what we need to do.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely not advocate. I don't want it to get to that point. I want it to go through the legal way. But at the same time, for better or for worse, and in my opinion, worse, America voted for radical change.
That's
right.
right.
Our government.
That's right.
And we are getting that. I think it's just destructive, but we are getting the radical change that America wanted. And Democrats were seen as the status quo. Is now the time to start going even further with tax the billionaires, health care for all? Is now the time to get radical in our legislation, not chaining ourselves to the White House.
No, but I think that's right. And I think that is exactly, Heather, what this election came down to. People saying, I'm not getting ahead. I'm working harder. I'm losing my kids, are leaving my community because they can't find work here, or worse, because they have died due to addiction. I mean, these are the kind of stories of grief that I've heard traveling this country, that people don't feel safe. They can get health care for their trans child, that women say, I cannot give birth safely in my own state anymore. I mean, this sort of deep economic anxiety and feeling like this whole system is rigged against me, they feel that way because it is. And what we are now witnessing is this complete betrayal by Donald Trump of people who looked to him and said, I may not like a lot of the show and the statements he makes, but I think he'll shake it up. And what we have to do with people at home is say, this is a betrayal of the trust that you put in him to shake things up on your behalf, because he's shaking things up, but it's not to benefit them. It is to benefit this tiny class of wealthiest people in this country. And it will be at the detriment of everything that government does. If we want to protect Social Security, which Democrats stand for and fight for, they're coming for it. You cannot lay off like they did hundreds and hundreds of Social Security workers and more to come, and have people get their checks or be able to sign up for benefits. I mean, these things have real costs. They know it's politically very dangerous for them to come at Social Security straight through the budget. So they're coming in through the back door, but it's all the same. They're going to take the money you earned and put aside for your retirement. And that we go right down Medicare, Medicaid. All of these programs are like fundamental underpinnings that get people the basic health care they need to survive. And at the same time, they're taking away our cancer research. My guest to the State of the Union is a mom of a 4-year-old named Declan who has a rare brain cancer. And he is going to face unknown treatments and protocols after he's done with the trial he's in. I can't imagine having a more devastating diagnosis as a mom of 3 than to be told your child is stage 4 cancer diagnosis. And then Donald Trump and Elon Musk are taking away the funding for the National Institute of Health that funds research in this country. They've taken it away. They've ended trials. They said you're not allowed to continue those in the future. There isn't a listener of your show that hasn't been touched by cancer. And the fact that they would do this to give tax cuts to people who will always be able to buy the health care they need for their families is outrageous. And so we have to continue to bring those voices of the real impacts of this. And it's why you're starting to see in the town halls in ruby red areas of this country the outrage that is building, whether it's in Alaska or Georgia or Oklahoma or up in Wisconsin. People understand and are connecting the dots, and that is our most important thing we can do right now, is be that stick in the wheel and say, this is the information you need to know. This is what happens when all these 1,000-page budget bills are torn up, when you fire randomly people who are making sure that our nuclear weapons are protected, that planes can fly safely in this country, that people get their disability checks, that our veterans get the health care that they deserve. It's those stories and Democrats who are bringing home those shared values. And that is our mission at this moment, to do everything we can to mobilize people to stop what they are doing.
All right, you brought me down for a second, and then I'm like fired up. I'm like, where's my third cup of coffee? Let's go. Whip Clark, I know you are so busy. I appreciate you giving me this time and my audience this time. Godspeed.
Yeah, we're in this together, and it really is like, it can be overwhelming. The chaos is a strategy on their part to divide us, to have us, panic. And there's a lot to panic about. But we also have to know that we are going to rise to this moment. We're going to do it together. We are going to be tough. We are going to fight every single day with every single tool that we have. And I really appreciate this time to talk to your listeners. And thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. All right. Now, I mean this with the most respect. Get back to work. Thank you so much.
Take my coffee and I'm
Yes, me too. Thank you for joining the American Resolution. Join the conversation by following us at American Resolution Pod on every social platform, all 647 of them. This podcast is a production of Rat Trap Entertainment, produced by Heather Gardner and Lauren Gardner with limited support from their cat, that little bastard.